Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, deadly airstrikes, dozens killed in rocket fire across Gaza City in the most severe outbreak of violence since the 2014 war. The latest on the unrest in the Middle East as tensions between Israel and Hamas grow. A party divided, Liz Cheney criticizing her own colleagues over their support of former President Donald Trump.
Remaining silent and ignoring the lie emboldens the liar. I will not participate in that.
The vote today that's expected to strip her of her leadership role with the GOP. Running on empty, drivers scrambling to get gas as stations report a shortage. A look at the economic impact as the Colonial Pipeline shutdown continues. And keeping an eye on the tiger, a big cat still on the loose after it was last seen roaming a Houston neighborhood, the latest on the search. That I can't believe is still going on.
We will have nonstop continuing coverage of it
we will
until
break
it's
in
found.
during the day, should we find it then. We'll get to the latest in that wild story a little bit later, but we begin in the Middle East, which is seeing the biggest escalation of violence between Israelis and Palestinians in 7 years, with both sides showing no signs of backing down.
Health officials say that 43 Palestinians have been killed, including 13 children, as Israeli fighter jets continue to strike Gaza. 5 Israelis have also died from rocket attacks fired toward towns in central Israel. NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley joins us now. So, Matt, first of all, bring us up to date with how things have escalated overnight.
Yeah, what we saw was a barrage of missiles fired in Israeli airstrikes against Gaza. As you mentioned, some 43 Gazans killed, some 13 children and 6 Israelis. So these are tit-for-tat attacks, and it's going to continue. You know, this is falling along some very familiar lines. I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen these sorts of images before, as you mentioned, back in 2014, and some of that street fighting in Jerusalem that we've seen. This is once again looking like it's going to kick off to, you know, this is when you talk about tit for tat, that is such a recipe for an escalating conflict. And that's why so many analysts, so many people have seen this story before, and they're really worried that without some kind of intervention from some political force, might be the new Biden administration, that this is going to escalate to back in 2014 where we saw thousands of people killed.
You know, Matt, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to intensify attacks on Gaza, while the leader of Hamas says he's ready for any escalation. So any idea at this point what it might take to try and get both sides to back down?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned before, both sides are going to be looking toward the White House. And that's the issue with Biden, this new American president who's taking over from a fiercely pro-Israel predecessor, Donald Trump. He made some of his most consequential moves around this conflict. And now it's going to be really difficult for the Biden administration to choose a path. Here's the issue. For the Biden administration, it looks kind of like a political loser. There's not that much to gain, and there's a whole lot to lose by intervening in this conflict. And so that's probably what the Biden administration is going to be looking at coming on from here. You know, in the last couple of days, the last week, all we've been hearing from the White House is essentially that the Israelis have a right to defend themselves, that all sides should try to be calm. But progressive Democrats and left-wing people who have so far prevailed within the Biden administration, they're pushing the Biden administration to take a stronger line in favor of the Palestinians and against the Israelis. But for so much time, for generations, being pro-Israel has been a bipartisan issue in the United States. And so that's why it's going to be tough to separate from that. Once again, it's looking like this is going to be a familiar dance between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and one that's going to see a lot of lives lost before it's over. Guys.
And Matt, let's talk about the global response. The UN's Middle East envoy is expected to brief the Security Council today. He is warning of a full-scale war. What are the international efforts that are being made to try and de-escalate the situation?
Well, normally in these sorts of situations, what we've seen in the past is that actually Egypt and some other Arab countries have played a critical role. Hamas is considered a terrorist organization. It's shunned by a lot of Arab leaders and Arab governments. They don't want to deal with Hamas. But the Egyptian government has a history of negotiating between the Israelis and the Palestinians in a way that has led to some kind of tenuous peace, though not anything near a resolution to this just forever conflict. So it looks as though the Egyptians and the Qataris and the United Nations have been trying to negotiate some sort of resolution. But again, guys, this isn't about Gaza versus Israel. This is really about what's going on in that neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah in Jerusalem. And that's where a Supreme Court case that would decide whether or not Palestinian families would be evicted from that neighborhood, that's been delayed. So once we actually hear from the Supreme Court, once they make a decision, you could either see some of this go down, some tensions sort of relaxed, or you could see this all flare up once again and go back into the cyclical pattern of violence that we've been seeing for generations. Guys?
All right, Matt Bradley, thank you so much.
Demand for gas is spiking in several states over fears of a shortage. The 5,500-mile Colonial Pipeline that runs from Houston to New York is still offline following a cyber attack. Georgia, Virginia, and North Carolina have declared a state of emergency. But Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm is urging Americans not to panic buy fuel, saying there is no gas shortage, just a supply crunch.
There should be no cause for hoarding gasoline, especially in light of the fact that the pipeline should be substantially operational by the end of this week.
Let's bring in MSNBC anchor Lindsay Reiser. She's in Fort Mill, South Carolina, covering the ripple effects of the ransomware attack. Lindsay, good morning. So the Energy Secretary, we just heard her there, and the White House are telling people not to panic buy. But I do understand where you are. Some stations are, in fact, already running out of fuel. Now, maybe that's because of the panic buying. But if you see a station doesn't have fuel, it makes you think there's a shortage. And I know there's long lines at stations that do have gas. What are people telling you? How long are they waiting? What are you seeing?
Hey, Savannah, good morning. Good to be with you. Yeah, experts are saying don't panic buy, but try telling that to people here. We are seeing long lines. And right now, things are looking pretty good here. We are seeing a bit of a line now snaking down the road. But yesterday, boy, it was pretty bad. And gas prices were already creeping up because of spring travel. There was already that demand that was increasing. Now you add this ransomware attack to it. I mean, keep in mind, Colonial Pipeline supplies about half of the East Coast fuel. So people are hearing state of emergency. They're hearing all of this news. They're rushing out to buy gas, and they're running out. Savannah.
Lindsay, let's talk about that state of emergency. I mentioned several state governors have already done that. Why is that?
So the governor of North Carolina issued a state of emergency, and that helps lift some regulations on some of these tanker drivers. The Department of Transportation also did that, lifting regulations on drivers in 17 states. And that means they can drive longer hours. Keep in mind, there's already been a national shortage of tanker drivers. And the South Carolina governor also, Henry McMaster, has tweeted, don't rush out to top off your gas. Don't hoard gas. We have enough supply. We just need those trucks to come out and make those deliveries. But of course, try telling that to people here. I mean, Gas Buddy is reporting 8% of South Carolina gas stations are out of fuel, 16% in North Carolina. I'm right here on the state line. People waiting in line for 45 minutes, an hour. Even yesterday, we saw people waiting in line only to get to the front of the line and be told, hey, guys, we're out of gas. Sorry, they had to be turned away. I think we have some of the interviews that we shot yesterday. Let's listen to that.
This is my kid's car. It's about half filled. I'm going to fill it up all the way just in case. But you never know. This may last a couple days, which I hope so, but it may last a lot longer.
So, Savannah, I just talked to a gentleman here at the gas station. They got a truckload overnight. They have gas. They were answering their phones yesterday saying, Millers, we have gas, because so many people were calling. And this gentleman I spoke with said he woke up bright and early, 5 a.m. He wanted to be first in line at the pump, and he was able to get gas, Savannah.
And Lindsay, just quickly, we're talking about drivers, but this is also impacting anybody getting on a flight potentially.
Yeah, there are some ripple effects here. American Airlines confirming that 2 long-haul flights out of the Charlotte airport, one to Honolulu, one to London, will have to make extra stops to load up on fuel, Savannah.
All right, Lindsay, thank you so much.
Today is the consequential vote to strip Congresswoman Liz Cheney of her leadership role in the Republican Party. But the Wyoming lawmaker is not going away quietly. Last night, she gave a blistering floor speech to a mostly empty chamber, slamming the GOP's crusade against the 2020 election results.
Today, we face a threat America has never seen before. A former president who provoked a violent attack on this Capitol in an effort to steal the election has resumed his aggressive effort to convince Americans that the election was stolen from him.
Keep in mind, an analysis by 538 finds that Congresswoman Cheney voted with former President Trump almost 93% of the time, while her likely successor, Representative Elise Stefanik, voted for the Trump agenda at a lower rate, almost 78%. Joining us now is NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell. So, Leanne, can you tell us more about what Congresswoman Cheney said on the House floor and how the vote might go today?
Well, that voting score that you just referenced is also one of Representative Cheney's messages. She notes that it's not about policy, it's about loyalty to the former president. Let's take a listen.
This is not about policy. This is not about partisanship. This is about our duty as Americans. Remaining silent and ignoring the lie emboldens the liar. I will not participate in that. I will not sit back and watch in silence while others lead our party down a path that abandons the rule of law and joins the former president's crusade to undermine our democracy.
So that was also a message to House Republican leadership, including Kevin McCarthy, who has really orchestrated the removal of Cheney from this position because of her position on the former president. How the vote is going to go today, it's going to happen this morning. It should be very quick. It's expected to be via secret ballot. I don't know how many votes of support she's going to get because it's secret ballot. People could be lying up until now. But I'm hearing she could only get 10 votes. I'm hearing she could get up to 50. I'm going to be watching for that vote tally, Joe.
Yeah, we all will. Of course, Leanne, even if Congresswoman Cheney is stripped of her leadership role, she is going to remain in Congress. And all signs indicate she's going to escalate her battle against Trumpism within the party. But with no leadership role and few public allies, what does her future hold?
She does plan to continue to talk out. That's why she gave that defiant speech showing her steadfast last night on the House floor. She's not going to go down quietly, and she's not going to go down at all. She might lose her leadership position, but she insists that she's going to remain in Congress. She's going to be a voice for truth, she says. She's going to run for re-election in Wyoming, even though that's going to be a big challenge at this point right now. And we'll see where the future holds. What the presidential election is just a few years from now. Her team's not talking about that yet, but she is definitely setting herself up to have a clear message and position within the Republican Party, Joe.
All right, Leanne, thank you so much. Today, the CDC could sign off on Pfizer's COVID vaccine for 12 to 15-year-olds, but some states are already offering shots to this younger age group.
That's right. Georgia started offering the vaccine yesterday to kids under 16, making that call after the FDA authorized the vaccine for emergency use for that age group on Monday. Today's CDC meeting comes a day after top health officials testified on Capitol Hill, full of contentious exchanges on the origins of COVID-19 and the guidance on masks. We have two reporters this morning, NBC News Now correspondent Priscilla Thompson on the CDC hearing today, and NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber is in Georgia, where kids 12 and older, as we just mentioned, are now getting vaccinated. Let's begin with Priscilla Thompson. Priscilla, good morning. So what can we expect from today's hearing with the CDC Advisory Committee?
Good morning, Savannah. Well, that advisory committee on immunization practice is going to meet, and they are expected to go ahead and expand eligibility for the Pfizer vaccine to include children aged 12 to 15 years old. So updating that recommendation. And after that, we expect that the CDC director, Rochelle Walensky, will ultimately sign off on that recommendation, really clearing the way for a nationwide, robust effort to get those shots into the arms of younger Americans. Savannah?
Now, top health officials testified on Capitol Hill yesterday, as I mentioned just a moment ago, and it got pretty contentious. CDC Director Rochelle Walensky defended her agency's guidance on masks. What happened there?
Yeah, Savannah, Republican lawmakers came out swinging at this hearing, calling the guidance that the CDC had provided outdated and also overly conservative, saying that they had lost the trust of the American people. Now, of course, Walensky defended the decisions made by her agency in their guidance, saying that essentially, as more Americans are becoming vaccinated, as the case counts are changing, the guidance is changing as well. And she really emphasized that. Take a listen to a bit of that exchange.
We have about a third of people in this country who are vaccinated. We have about a third of counties in this country that still have over 100 cases per 100,000. We are working to review our guidance and to update our guidance.
You're vaccinated and everybody else is in the room is vaccinated, but you're wearing a mask. The American people have just lost patience with us. With you guys. I just ask you to just kind of be aware of their frustration and get a little real time into updating these things.
And of course, this comes after the CDC lifted that outdoor mask mandate, citing that less than 10% of transmission occurs outdoors. And in the past several days, a number of experts have come out and said that is a bit misleading, that it may actually be far less than 10%, perhaps even less than 1% of transmission that is occurring outdoors.
Yeah, that made some news yesterday. Now, Priscilla, let's talk about the vaccine rollout. So we're seeing states do things like provide vaccine sites at MTA stations, things like that, so that people are able to get the shot wherever they are. And now we're actually also seeing the Biden administration step in here with a plan to speed up the pace of vaccinations. It has to do with free rides to those shots. Tell us about that.
That's right. Folks who are wanting to get the vaccine are now going to be able to hail an Uber or a Lyft for free in order to get that shot. Lyft says that they are going to be offering $15 promo codes for each leg of the ride, so to and from the vaccine site. And folks can choose to get there by car, but they can also use those scooters and bikes that Lyft provides in certain cities. So all in an effort to speed up this vaccine rollout. And of course, those promotions are going to be running from around May 24th through July 4th. So folks will have about a month to get that taken care of. Savannah?
All right, Priscilla Thompson, thanks so much.
Let's go to NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber in Stonecrest, Georgia, where they're already vaccinating adolescents. So, Ellison, the CDC is supposed to issue that recommendation on the Pfizer vaccine for ages 12 to 15 today, as we just reported. So how is Georgia already vaccinating that age group?
Yeah, so as you said, the FDA amended the emergency use authorization for the Pfizer vaccine to include 12 to 15-year-olds. That happened on Monday. But the thing to remember is that the FDA did not issue a new emergency use authorization. They amended and expanded on the one that was initially issued for Pfizer back in December. And if you can remember back to December, the CDC Advisory Board actually did meet at that time as well before Pfizer vaccines started being given to people to issue usage guidance. So guidance already exists and is out there. And really, the only thing that has changed here from the FDA is that they are now allowing 12 to 15-year-olds to get vaccinated. It's still the same doses, the same two-shot regimen prior. So really, we're not kind of starting totally from scratch here. So in some ways, there's that aspect playing here. The state of Georgia also says that they were worried that if they told young people who maybe showed up to get vaccinated today or yesterday, hey, come back in 24, 48 hours, that they might not actually come back and that they really just need to get people vaccinated. So what Georgia's Department of Public Health decided to do is they said, OK, if anyone shows up at a vaccination site that we run or is associated with us, the Department of Public Health, and they're in that age group 12 to 15, and they have parental or legal guardian consent forms signed with them, then they can go ahead and be vaccinated. And Georgia, by the way, is not the only state to go ahead and take this step a little early when you think that the CDC Advisory Board is meeting later today. There are two other states doing this as well, Delaware and also Arkansas. Joe?
Yeah, good point to make there. Now, Ellison, what are you hearing from the parents and kids who got the shot already? Why was it so important for them to do this as soon as possible?
I mean, this isn't an easy decision for any family. And the people that we have talked to, even the ones who were really eager to go ahead and get this, they said there was a lot of time, a lot of research in the past months waiting for this moment to actually happen. We spoke to one mother and her 13-year-old son. She could not wait to get him vaccinated. He has been doing virtual schooling at home. He starts high school in the fall. Both he and his mom want to go back to in-person learning. But in order to do that, both of them felt like he needed to be vaccinated first. Here's some more of what they had to say.
And the experience itself really wasn't that bad. I just hate needles, so that wasn't fun. But the shot didn't hurt at all. The soreness of the arm is kind of annoying, but not really that bad.
I really just hope to get back to a sense of normalcy. And I know there's plenty of people in Georgia that have felt comfortable doing that, and that's worked for them. But my kids have been, in school virtual. They have not been participating in sports or having play dates. And so I really hope that this can get us back to that sense of normalcy.
So Ben, who you heard from there, is 13, but he told us almost 14. We asked him what he is absolutely looking forward to more than anything once he is fully vaccinated. And he said he is really excited and already planning to have a sleepover with friends. He said that is something that he has not been able to do in a year and a half. He just wants to have a sleepover with some friends, be social, and maybe go to a movie theater. Joe?
Yeah, be a kid. So, all right, good to hear. Ben hates needles, but the shot didn't hurt at all. Good message to pass along. Allison, thanks so much. Now let's get a check on your morning news now weather.
Good morning, Bill Cairns.
Good morning. You can see where it's raining this morning by that live show. You can hear it on the tent that was over her head.
And Lindsay Risers,
that's a pretty
I think,
heavy
too.
dose of rain. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was just outside of Atlanta that we're watching those downpours. So the south is where all the rain is. It's been that way. We had some thunderstorms that even produced a tornado in North Carolina. And this is this video, example number 1 million by where you don't want to be when a storm rolls through. And that's a mobile home. This tree sliced right through this mobile home. The family was inside. They were trapped for about 2 hours while they had tried to remove the tree. But they were uninjured, which is pretty amazing. If they were just on one end instead of the other, they wouldn't be telling this story. So, if a big storm rolls through, all the advice for hurricanes and tornadoes or severe thunderstorms is get out. All right, so here's what we're dealing with this morning. There's that rain near Atlanta, also a lot of heavy rain upstate South Carolina and rolling through North Carolina. The line of thunderstorms, which has produced a little bit of wind damage and also some flash flooding, is rolling right through Pensacola. A lot of lightning strikes with that line, too. So the drive right now down Interstate 10 from Mobile to Pensacola heading towards Panama City is not a fun one, and that line of storms will eventually weaken. We're also watching flash flood warnings just north of Biloxi and a little area just north of Mobile. The flash flooding will end during the day today. We still will see isolated totals of 1 to 3 inches, especially southern Georgia, areas from Jacksonville north up to Savannah. So today's forecast, it's a chilly morning once again in the Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, and Northeast. But what a beautiful afternoon it's going to be once again. Temperatures in the 60s, very comfortable air from D.C. all the way up through Boston. And the heat's beginning to build in the west. 100 today in Phoenix, and it looks like dry conditions prevail. Looking at the extended forecast, guys, for like the Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, and the Northeast, I mean, this beautiful May air mass continues right into the weekend. Make your outdoor plans.
Good for them.
Great.
All right, Bill. Thank you.
Coming up, Medina Spirit heading back to the track.
The Kentucky Derby winner cleared to race after failing a post-race drug test. Details are up next on Morning News Now. In North Carolina, the family of Andrew Brown Jr. is calling for justice after viewing more body camera video showing his deadly encounter with sheriff's deputies. The family and their attorneys were allowed by a judge to view 20 minutes of footage showing the moment Brown was shot and killed by deputies in Elizabeth City last month. The deputies had sought to serve a warrant for his arrest on felony drug charges. Family lawyers say the video proves the shooting was an ambush.
Come court, there's no way that this could be justified. There's no way possible. He wasn't in the wrong at all. What's in the light, what's in the dark gonna come to the light.
For more now, I want to bring in NBC News correspondent Katie Beck joining us from Elizabeth City. Katie, good morning. So a lawyer representing the deputies said they were justified in Brown's killing. But as we just heard, Brown's family claims he did nothing wrong. What more did they say after viewing that new video?
Well, that was really the stark contrast yesterday, right? What the DA had presented in court as the scenario and what Brown's families and attorneys say they saw on that videotape. The DA in a court hearing just a few weeks ago said that Brown had moved forward and back in his vehicle, making contact with deputies, and that's when shots were fired. Yesterday, Brown's family and lawyers came out and said that was not the case, that shots were fired prior to any movement in that vehicle, and that at no point did Brown's vehicle make contact with with officers. They were very clear to say that they felt this was an ambush, that he was murdered, using the strongest of language and terms to paint the picture of what they feel was an unjustified police shooting. Now, they had previously seen 20 seconds. Yesterday, they saw almost 20 minutes. They feel validated and vindicated from watching more of that video and say it raises more questions about the conduct of these police officers. Here's what a member of the family had to say.
We were able to see Mr. Brown sitting in his vehicle as he was ambushed and as the sheriff's office made their way to his residence. Appearing to be surprised, it appears that he was possibly on the phone. At all times, his hands were visible. At all times, you could see that he was not a threat.
Now, they were also saying Mr. Brown in this video was actually turning his car away from police. At no time was he driving towards them. So the perceived threat, they say, was not in question in this video at all. And they really do draw a stark contrast to what the DA had previously said in court in front of a judge. Now, we have not seen that video. All of this is speculation at this point. The public release, we have no way of knowing when that could be.
All right, Katie Beck, thank you so much.
A new video taken at the southern border shows a group of abandoned migrant children. The youngest is just 11 months old. NBC News correspondent Gabe Gutierrez takes a closer look.
No mother, no father.
They were found abandoned by smugglers on the border. 5 undocumented girls from Honduras and Guatemala, ranging from just 11 months old to 7 years. Discovered by a Texas farmer who gave them water and food in the sweltering heat.
They were out there in the dark all night, totally alone.
The Border Patrol says the children are in government custody and did not require medical attention, but it's another heartbreaking reminder of the stakes in this border surge. Last month, this 10-year-old Nicaraguan boy was found alone and crying. Another video showed smugglers dropping 2 toddlers from Ecuador over a 14-foot-high border fence. Despite repeated requests, Customs and Border Protection has not yet released updated apprehension numbers for April. In March, agents stopped more than 172,000 migrants at the border, a 20-year high. The record surge of children began after President Biden changed border policy and began allowing unaccompanied minors and many families to stay in the U.S. This message to migrants from the White House.
The border is closed.
But near Roma, Texas last week, this woman out of breath told us she was desperate.
We're following breaking news on Capitol Hill. Congresswoman Liz Cheney has been ousted from her leadership position by House Republicans. Multiple sources tell NBC News it was done by a voice vote. No roll call, no secret ballot. The meeting lasted less than 20 minutes. Let's go right to NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell. So, Leanne, first of all, tell us a little more about what happened and this voice vote. Was this what was expected or was that a surprise?
Hey, Joe. So we'll start with what happened today. Representative Liz Cheney started the conference meeting because this was actually her conference meeting as GOP conference chair for the moment. And she made a few remarks. And in those remarks, she said in part that our nation needs this Republican Party as a strong party based on truth so we can shape the future. And she continued to really repeat what she said last night, that the path of former President Donald Trump is not the path of the party moving forward. And after that, then they decided not to hold a secret ballot, a roll call of where members stand on the issue of Liz Cheney. Instead, they just did it by a voice vote. So people aren't on the record. No member had to actually say what they thought, even if it was a secret ballot, but it was a voice vote. And our sources tell us that it was a resounding support to remove her from this position, Joe. No, we didn't really expect it to happen this way, but it's very clear that members did not want to take this vote. There was an overwhelming majority who wanted her to be removed from this position. And so they just took out the necessary pain of having their name down on a position that they would rather just raise their hand and say exactly how they felt, Joe.
Yeah, so Leanne, we know she made some strong comments yesterday to a nearly empty House chamber. And was it surprising that she decided to speak again today? And what more can you tell us about what she told the group?
So it wasn't really surprising. She wanted to speak today, but we weren't sure if she was going to be able to. This show was run by House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy. We weren't sure if he was going to be able to allow her to speak. But when she opened up the conference with the pledge and the prayer, she said that she wants to take a couple moments to give her thoughts. She said she has a lot of respect for many people in the room. After this very short meeting that only lasted about 20 minutes, she did come to the cameras and took a couple questions, including on the future of the Republican Party and what the former president's role is. I think we have some of that sound. Let's play, and if not, I'll just talk through it.
We have had the conference meeting. I am absolutely committed, as I said last night, as I said just now to my colleagues, that we must go forward based on truth. We cannot both embrace the big lie and embrace the Constitution. And going forward, the nation needs it. The nation needs a strong Republican Party. The nation needs a party that is based upon fundamental principles of conservatism. And I am committed and dedicated to ensuring that that's how this party goes forward, and I plan to lead the fight to do that.
And that has been a consistent message from Representative Cheney. That's something similar to what she said on the House floor last night. That's similar to what she told her members behind closed doors earlier this morning. And she is now determined to continue to be that voice within the Republican Party, to continue to stand up against the former president and the lies he continues to tell about the past election, regardless of what sort of consequences that brings her. Of course, she dealt a major consequence by losing her seat in leadership. But I will say one more thing, Joe. She does have some support. Representative Adam Kinzinger of Illinois has been a vocal supporter of Representative Cheney. He is standing right by her. And then another member who hasn't been vocal texted me and said after this vote, the Republican Party in the House is done. They fear for the future of the party because of the stance that it is taking. So there is still some belly aching among Republicans who think that this is absolutely the wrong move, Joe.
All right, Leanne Caldwell, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Researchers have found that a shrunken head that was used as a prop in a 1979 movie is real. The head, or Sansa in Amazonian languages, had been on display at Mercer University in Georgia for decades. It even appeared in the movie Wise Blood, where it was damaged when it was glued onto a fake body. Researchers spent years authenticating the Sansa by performing tests like reconstructing a three-dimensional model and performing CT scans. It will now be sent back to Ecuador, where researchers hope it will be properly preserved. Many museums, including the Smithsonian, have been repatriating human remains from their collections as attitudes have changed. Savannah, a lot of interest in this one. In fact, it was the #1 story at NBCNews.com.
Oh, wow. That's kind of interesting. It is kind of wild that it was just able to be used as a prop for a movie if they thought maybe there was a chance it was real.
Yeah, and maybe they didn't know that at the time, but now they've done the work and figured it out.
Yeah, exactly. Very cool. Thanks, Joe. We got a little extra time to do our taxes this year, but the deadline is approaching. NBC News senior business correspondent Stephanie Rule has everything you need to know before you file.
Joe and Savannah, the tax man cometh a bit later than usual this year. April 15th is now May 17th, less than 1 week to file your taxes. But this year, the due date isn't the only big change when it comes to your taxes. Take a look. For financial planners like Milton Rodriguez, it's go time.
I cannot imagine what this would have been like without the extra months.
The IRS's tax deadline is now less than a week away.
Does it make a difference whether I file on paper or should I do it online?
It's always much more secure to do it online, and it's quicker to get a refund via direct deposit. Mailing is not the ideal option.
Between stimulus checks, millions on unemployment, and a work-from-home surge, taxes are likely to be more confusing than ever. Key things to know. At the federal level, your stimulus check is tax-free. And if you claimed unemployment, the first $10,200 also tax-free. And the child tax credit, now $3,000 for kids 6 and up, and $3,600 for younger children.
If you owe taxes, you want to try and pay as much as possible by the May 17th deadline. Anything that is unpaid does have penalties and interest assessed.
And remember, if you owe money, you can work out a payment plan with the IRS. If you make less than $72,000 a year, the IRS will help you file for free. And if you've moved states, consider hiring a professional. And remember, guys, you must hit submit by midnight on May 17th. Joe, Savannah, I'm counting on you.
The pandemic has made cell phones and laptops our lifelines. We've relied on them to work, to go to school, and to escape or connect with our friends and family. But a rising number of Americans are finding it hard to put their devices down. NBC's Lester Holt takes a look at the social challenge of internet addiction.
Joe and Savannah, many of us have turned to our screens and devices to navigate life with COVID, but for some, a practical necessity became something more. This morning, more on the social challenge with a look at internet addiction. In our pandemic isolation, the internet became a lifeline, but for others, a life-altering portal to what some describe as a rabbit hole. Scott Zayat says he's been down it.
I would imagine it's like what any addiction feels like. You think about actually giving it up.
Zayat's found himself spending more and more time online. In his case, feeding an insatiable appetite for politics. The election and Capitol siege particularly drew him in.
Does it feel like you're just being swept down this tunnel?
Yeah. They cycle the things that you want to see, or they know what you want to read, and so they feed you more and more of that. So I know I feed into it, right? I know it's happening, and yet I still click and open that next article.
Psychiatrist Dr. Howard Foreman says internet addiction is real.
Just based on the volume of calls that I am getting, volume of calls that my colleagues are getting, it is certainly growing. And I think we're going to see that this emerges as one of the major behavioral addictions in the United States.
Though published research in the U.S. is scarce, overseas studies have noted sharp increases in internet dependence during the pandemic, with links to anxiety and depression.
I've had to go on blood pressure medicine.
Scientifically, what is happening when we cross this line on the computer and into addiction?
Every time that you get a like or a follow or someone comments on something that you've posted, you get a surge of dopamine in a part of the brain that we call in layman's terms the pleasure center. And it gets very addicting once you get more and more of this surge of pleasure.
Attempts to stop cold, he says, generally fail.
The therapy that I always start with is that you start out with a simple do and a simple don't. And the simple do is do engage in activities that previously were pleasurable to you before the internet took over your life.
As for Scott, a healthcare worker, online disinformation and lies about COVID are still triggers.
I know it's happening, and yet I still click and open that next article.
A struggle between the healthy need to know and engage and the unhealthy fall into that rabbit hole.
Time for our medical roundup, a look at the latest health studies you may have missed. NBC News medical contributor Dr. Natalie Azar joins us now with more on this. Natalie, good morning. So first of all, let's start with a study that says drinking 2 or more sugary drinks a day doubles the risk of colon cancer in women who are under the age of 50. What more can you tell us about this, and might it be true for men too?
Well, to get to the second part first, Joe, this research was done from participants in the Women's Health Study, which I'm sure you've all heard of, which has just given us invaluable information on women's health. But could we extrapolate to men? Sure. So why is this important? Well, we know that the incidence of colorectal cancer has increased dramatically in the last number of years in individuals younger than 50, but we don't exactly know why. Experts have suggested that perhaps environmental factors, diet could play a role, and we know that the intake of sugary drinks can increase the risk of obesity as well as diabetes, but we weren't sure about a link to colon cancer. So in this particular study, what they found that women who consumed at least one extra sugary drink per day increased their risk for colon cancer by about 16%. As you know, sugar sweetened drinks make up the leading source of added sugars in the U.S. diet, and roughly adults born in 1990 have roughly twice the risk of colon cancer than individuals who were born decades before. So doctor's orders, grab a glass of water, flavored seltzer instead of that sugary drink. Definitely check the label to see how much sugar and how much carbohydrate you're consuming, and try to cut back by mixing sweetened with unsweetened drinks to sort of taper yourself off that sugary high slowly, Joe.
Good advice there. Let's move on to a study that says sleeping pills don't seem to work long-term for insomnia in middle-aged women. Does this mean they work in the first few weeks but shouldn't be taken longer than that? What's the takeaway here?
So, Joe, it's interesting. Obviously, as we get older, especially women around menopause, do start to experience some sleep disturbance. And it's very normal to want to try to have a sleep aid to assist us in falling asleep. And there is a nuanced difference between taking something to help you fall asleep as opposed to taking something that's actually going to improve the quality of your sleep and the duration of your sleep. So this study, as the other, was also done in women. And they found basically that sleeping aids such as Ambien and, benzodiazepines, Valium, those kinds of things do work in the short term, maybe up to about 6 months. But after 2 years, there was no difference in terms of the ability to fall asleep, to stay asleep, or waking early between two groups of women who either took sleeping aids or didn't take sleeping aids. So doctor's orders, and this is basic sleep hygiene, Joe. You want to use the bed for sleep and intimacy only. It's not a time for, being on the computer and being on your phones, and especially with phones and devices, you want to get rid of those at least 30 minutes before bed. You want to avoid caffeine intake later in the day. And one really important thing is that if you find yourself awake in the middle of the night and you can't fall back asleep, don't lie there for more than 30 minutes staring at the clock. You should get up, grab a book, some dim light, and read until you get tired, and then try to go to sleep again.
That's good advice. I didn't know that one, so that's good to know. All right. Now, we've learned to live with the new normal of masking and distancing, but as we start to emerge and re-enter the world, some fear we could be in store for a bad flu season. How worried should we be about this?
So, we always have this expectation of doomsday. Remember last year we said we were going to have a twindemic, and that didn't happen. And the reason that it didn't happen is that all the behaviors that we use to mitigate against coronavirus actually ended up helping us protect ourselves from the flu. Last year, this past season, we had roughly 2,000 cases of flu, as opposed to the year before where we had 200,000 cases. Now, the concern here among experts is that because we were not exposed, our population in the U.S. right now has very low immunity against certain flu strains going into next year, and that is very concerning. One thing that was brought up, every year around February, the WHO identifies the strains that are going to be in the flu shot for the upcoming year. And we've identified which strains they are going to be. However, we haven't done a lot of sampling just because we haven't had a lot of cases. So experts are particularly concerned for next year that we could have that vaccine strain mismatch that we talk about a lot. What are the doctor's orders for this? I know I sound like a broken record. We all do, but get your flu shot. It's the thing that will save you from hospitalization and death. And now we know social distancing, washing our hands, not touching our faces. And by the way, maybe still wearing a mask, even if we don't have to because of COVID-19 in certain areas indoors might still be recommended. Just wait and see. And certainly if you're sick, you stay home.
And we've all gotten really good at washing our hands in the last year, so hopefully that sticks around. All right, Dr. Azar, as always, thank you so much.
Thanks, Joe.
Coming up, catastrophe.
A tiger seen prowling in a Texas neighborhood is still missing. The latest on the search after the break.
Time for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you.
CNBC's Bertha Coombs is with us this morning. Hi, Bertha.
Hi, Joan, Savannah. This one matters to you if you're into cruising. Carnival is providing an update on some possible timing of them restarting sales. They expect perhaps in July to begin sailing on 3 ships from Florida and Texas. The Carnival's also searching for a way for ships to visit Alaska, where they're currently unable to sail through February due to Canada's cruise ban. Given the uncertainty, though, travelers are allowed to cancel without penalty by May 31st to get a full refund. TikTok, meantime, is testing a recruiting tool to help people find jobs and recruiters and brands to discover solid candidates. Axios is reporting that the feature will be outside of the core TikTok app. It'll be on a website where job listings are posted. Most likely, there'll be entry-level positions, and you'll be able to post a video resume and add that to your profile as well. And Moet Hennessy is anticipating a post-COVID renaissance as consumers flock to reopen bars and restaurants and splurge on pricier drinks to celebrate. Company which owns Moet and Chandon, Krug, Veuve Clicquot, Hennessy, and other brands that Joe drinks all the time, says that people are clearly trading up and now have money to burn since the pandemic has receded in parts of the U.S. And this has led to a boom for things like cognac, which has left Hennessy struggling to keep up with demand. As long as the rosé keeps flowing, I'm all right.
Yeah, no, well, cognac is making a comeback.
Yeah, wow.
That's
something.
All right.
Thanks, Bertha. Good to see you.
Authorities in Texas are still searching for that large tiger last spotted Sunday in a Houston suburb.
NBC News correspondent Morgan Chesky has the latest.
This morning, authorities still on the prowl, searching for a missing tiger seen roaming the streets of Houston.
It makes us cringe to all of us just to know there's a wild animal at large.
Oh my gosh. The big cat's unexpected appearance, an unusual getaway in an SUV, leaving neighbors and even Houston's mayor baffled.
Let's find the tiger and let's place the tiger in the most appropriate place.
While the hunt for the Bengal tiger continues, authorities did track down Victor Cuevas, the man who was allegedly housing the animal. He's now in a Texas jail, charged with felony evading arrest.
Cops are here!
After police say he sped off with the tiger inside his vehicle. But his attorney denies Cuevas is the owner of the 9-month-old male tiger that he says is named India.
Well, you know, I think it is a reasonable deduction from looking at the video that my client has been in contact with this animal before. It doesn't mean it's his.
At Tiger Creek Animal Sanctuary outside Dallas, Director Emily Owen oversees the care of 17 tigers, nursing the often abandoned or neglected big cats back to health.
How important is it that they find this tiger fast?
The longer the cat goes without proper care, the more danger it's in, the more danger the people around it are in.
After watching the now viral video from Houston, Owen says the cat's comfort level around people leads her to believe it's now totally reliant on those taking care of it in secret.
I absolutely do not think the animal is just roaming around. I think it's being hidden somewhere.
Back in Houston, with a man behind bars and a tiger on the lam, those living nearby can't help but wonder, what's next?
Yeah, and you know, that scares you too, because it's like if the tiger was with the guy and he's in custody, where is the tiger?
President Biden released his America the Beautiful plan last week, pledging to conserve a third of the nation's land and water by 2030, doubling the current amount. Well, in one small California town, there is a fight between those hoping to protect the land and that classic California quest for gold. NBC's Gotti Schwartz traveled to the Eastern Sierras to find out more.
What we're looking at up here is sort of the highest point of the mesa on the northern end. It is a high desert climate oasis for Joshua trees.
Wendy Schneider and Jorah Fogg are hiking through a slice of high California desert called Conglomerate Mesa, and the two environmentalists are searching for patches like this.
So this is the area of a drill pad that was part of K2 Gold's Phase 1 exploration. And as you can see, it's completely denuded of any plant life, and it's a pretty large area. You can see how this would start to add up
They think this could mark the beginning of the end for the Mesa ecosystem, because here in the dirt and rocks are tiny specks of gold, the precious metal that put California on the map.
I would say the juice is not worth the squeeze. There would be a few low-paying jobs that would last for about a decade. And in exchange for that, we would destroy Conglomerate Mesa forever. It is not a good trade.
One of the biggest fears, dangerous chemicals that could be used in extracting the gold. Fears raised by county supervisors and regular citizens that mining could come in the form of what's called an open-pit cyanide heap leach mine, where rocks containing gold are brought to the surface, then basically melted down with cyanide to separate out the gold.
We know that mining brings lots and lots of jobs and could bring tens of millions of dollars to the local economy.
Kit Coal represents the company that's already started exploratory drilling.
Even though we're drilling very small holes looking for the gold, we're still required to put everything back and replant to restore the environment back to what it was before we started.
K2 and its local subsidiary Mojave Precious Metals say they're just exploring, trying to find out how much gold is here, and they're drilling around, not on top of the mesa. They say if they find enough, a larger company would buy the mining rights from them, and they would build the mine.
And if that mine does use materials like cyanide, those are heavily regulated types of chemicals that then would be subject to local, state, and federal regulation. Again, we don't use those types of materials right now in the exploration phase.
But we're talking heap leach mining with cyanide, possibly in the future. Those words all together, I mean, they're concerning for a lot of people.
And there are mines right now that are using those technologies, but we just don't know for the future, right, when this exploration, if it ever becomes a mine, if that type of mining technology, if that heap leach mining would be used. So it would be up to the mining company to determine that.
But for many, the mesa is worth more than gold. It's sacred to several tribes in the area who have occupied the region for over 10,000 years.
You could compare it to, Arlington Cemetery or the Sistine Chapel or things like that, But this is all natural, but we have a history, we have a spiritual connection to it.
Kathy Bancroft and Janice Gonzalez are tribal historic preservation officers for the Lone Pine Paiute Shoshone Tribe and Timbisha Shoshone Tribe. K2 paid the tribes to assess how cultural artifacts would be impacted by exploratory mining on Conglomerate Mesa.
When we got to the mesa, and I started getting out, and then right off the bat, I just started finding things, artifacts.
The company says they're making every effort to protect cultural heritage and consult with the tribes on protecting artifacts. But some local leaders say even more is at stake.
Hey, if this is the direction we want to go with clean energies, then we need these types of minerals. Where are they going to come from?
Ultimately, locals won't have the final say. Conglomerate Mesa is federal public land and could become a testing ground for how the Biden administration and the Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, weigh local concerns, native voices, and renewable energy, with a decision on Conglomerate Mesa expected this fall.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.